All right, fight fans, welcome to Caveman Corner with your host, Jeff.
Captain Caveman!
Then,
Hey, fight fans, we're in Buffalo, New York. It's nice and snowy and awful outside. But today we got a special guest, Mr. Fred Ettish. How you doing, Fred?
Hey, I'm doing all right. How are you guys doing out there in Buffalo?
We're doing all right. How about you, Ray?
yeah, it's okay over here. It snowed a little bit, but not too bad. We had worse.
So I wanted to bring you on the show, man. You're one of the pioneers of UFC. You fought in UFC 2, which is actually the first UFC I saw. And your story to me is amazing. So I wanted to bring you on and just talk about life and what you've been doing and everything else.
It's my pleasure. It's my honor.
I feel honored, too, myself. When you found out about UFC 2, how did you find out?
One of my karate students found an article, or actually an advertisement in Black Belt magazine and showed it to me, and that was the first I'd heard about it.
Did you have any kind of full contact experience? Were you fighting full contact karate at that time?
No, not anything, not in the sport combat aspect at all. We went hard in the dojo, but obviously there's some limitations too, because we never used any protective gear other than like a mouth guard, a cup. So no, I didn't have any sport combat experience whatsoever.
When you signed to fight, did you think you were going to actually get into the UFC when you filled out the application and sent it in, or did you just kind of do it on a lark?
Well, the way it worked is I had sent a letter to Art Davey as soon as I saw the advertisement at Black Belt, and he sent me back a letter saying that UFC 2 was full. Maybe think about me for a later one, and thank you for sending him a letter. And so I pretty much forgot about it until I got a voicemail or a phone message one day. It was a Saturday, and it was Art left the message and said, "Hey, one of my main card guys got hurt, Ken Shamrock. He broke his hand, and so I had to take one of my alternates and move him into the main card, and asked me if I would want to come down as an alternate." So I got on the phone and called him back and said, "Yeah, I'd love to," and we discussed a little bit some different scenarios, and I asked him, under what situation will I get to fight? And he said, if somebody gets hurt before fight night, or if somebody doesn't show up for the fight, that's the only way you get to fight. And I asked him if I could get to fight the other alternate, like they did in UFC 1, and he said, no, because it's a 16-man tournament, we're not going to have time for that. So if everybody shows up and everybody's healthy when they get there, then you're out, and we'll bring you back for a later one.
What kind of how far in advance did you get that notice that you were going to actually be the alternate, and what kind of training did you do for the lead up to UFC 2?
It was less than 2 weeks. It was close enough where Art FedExed me the tickets overnight to get them to me quickly to make sure I got the tickets in time to get to Denver. My training, obviously, on short notice like that, I didn't have much opportunity to change anything up. I just increased the intensity as much as I could in the short time that I had, and tried to get myself mentally ready for what was to come.
now, did you ever see UFC 1?
I'd never seen it. Nope, I did not see it.
And did you expect to fight any grapplers?
I thought that that the possibility of fight any type of fighter existed, because just from what I read about the type of a tournament that it was that it was martial artists from all walks of life and different styles of martial arts. So it would have been a test of any one of a number of ways. It could have been a good striker. It could have been a good grappler. It could have been a sumo guy. It could have been anything.
Going back to time period, people don't really understand that this was like a bloodbath. It was marketed as martial art versus martial art. So you came from a pretty good karate background. Can you describe your background in the martial arts? I
started training when I was a very young teenager back in Norwalk, Connecticut, where I lived most of my first 15 years of my life. And that was in Chinese Kempo. And I started training in Okinawan karate in 1979. And that's what I've trained in ever since then, and still train to in this day. It's different than what most people think when they go to most American karate style schools. We didn't do a lot of tournaments, so we did do some tournaments. We didn't do a lot. We did a lot of body conditioning, a lot of hard striking. We did do joint locking and what has come to be known as submissions, but we did most of them from our feet. We didn't do a whole lot of work on the ground like a jiu-jitsu person would do. It's a good style. It's a hard, soft mixture. It's a mobile style. It's got a lot of good movement and utilization of angles, utilization of combinations. It's very well rounded, and like I said, I still practice to this day.
Now, how you feel about the new fighters with the karate style? Like we got Machida and
GSP.
GSP came from a karate background. John Jones even had a karate background too. I mean,
all the guys you mentioned are absolutely amazing. Obviously, the one that my style would most look like would be Machida, because he's a Shotokan person. His father's a Shotokan teacher, and the Shotokan style shares roots with our style if you go back in the family tree far enough. So there are significant differences, but of the styles of the people that you mentioned, the way that our style is rendered would be most like Machida-san.
So you got the call to go to UFC. Obviously, it's a quick notice fight. They FedEx you the tickets. You got there. You didn't find out you were fighting until probably they lost somebody, right? Right, minutes before the fight.
Yeah, they lost Ken.
Yeah, it was definitely a last minute thing. It was a Friday night fight, and on Thursday night when the last fighter got there, Art Davey came up to me and said, "Hey, we got our last guy here. Everybody's good to go, so you're not going to be fighting." And he said, "Thanks for coming down, and thanks for helping us out and being here on short notice, and we'll definitely bring you back for another one." And that was the end of that. And then fight night came, and I was at the arena, and Art was trying to run the show along with the other production people, and it was pretty chaotic. The arena was small. The dressing rooms were scattered. There was fighters were put up in a Skid Row hotel across the street from Mammoth Gardens, and things were kind of swirling, pretty hot and heavy. And so Art asked me to make sure that I helped him get the fighters up to the staging area okay so the pay-per-view could run smoothly. And I was in the midst of doing that, and I had just brought up Hoist Gracie's opponent, Ichihara from Japan, and was just walking back downstairs to look for whoever was next. And then Horian Gracie was coming up the stairs, and he grabs him by the arm, and he says, "Hey, are you ready to fight?" And I had looked at him with one of my more intelligent looks, and I went, "What?" I asked him, "You mean right now?" And he goes, "Yes, right now. Frank Hamilton hurt his hand, and I need you to fight." And I went, "Well, shit, I guess." And so I went and found my guys who had my gear, and we tried to find a place to warm up. And the next thing I knew, I was walking the walk.
Do you think you were mentally prepared that night to go out and fight?
Oh, hell no. That's the main thing that let me down more than anything else was mentally I was completely checked out. The whole thing got the best of me. I'm not a person that does things in front of large groups of people very well. I'm not used to doing that. I'm not comfortable doing that. It's really out of my comfort zone. And, with that already against me, and then having not had time to try and get my mind focused and prepared, that was my main undoing. I was completely checked out. And then that's not an excuse. It's reality. It's what it was. I set myself up for it. I should have been, I should have not let my mental guard down until after everything was over, on any given chance that I might get the fight. They never mentioned the possibility of fighting if somebody won a fight but got hurt and wouldn't continue. At least they didn't. They never mentioned it to me. If they'd mentioned it to anybody, it was never relayed to me.
They were probably hoping to give a buy or depend. They probably really didn't know what was going on either because they didn't know how long the fights were going to last. They had that short pay-per-view window. It's not like it is today where they have an extra hour. It's totally different. Did you think that negotiate for money to go out there to save their show?
There wasn't much of a negotiation. Art just said, "Here, you come out here, we'll pay you $1,000. If you fight," and that was basically it. I knew I was, if I got if I got a fight, I'd get $1,000. And then obviously if I won, I would have gotten more. So, as far as just going out there, I was not promised any money except for myself and one person that came out there with me. We got our flight, we got our hotel, and we got a per diem for food, and that was it.
What kind of per diem did they give you? Was it enough to get food if they put you up in a Skid Row hotel?
I think they gave us $50 a day each to eat on, which back in 1994 wasn't too bad.
No, that's better than I get at my job now, so that's not too bad. I guess I can't fault them for being cheap. What would you have gotten if you beat Johnny Rhodes that night?
I don't remember what the pay structure was. I know it was $1,000 for the first for the first fight. After that, I don't remember how it all hung together. I've got it on the contract that I've got stashed away somewhere, but I don't remember what it was.
Okay, so you went out there and you were going out to fight Johnny Rhodes. Did you actually even know who you were fighting before you got in the cage, since it was so last minute? Did you think about that? Were you guys discussing strategy?
I didn't have a clue who I was fighting. I walked in there and there he was, and that's when I knew.
Sorry, I was just crossing out my notes I had for you. I was expecting a longer answer. Had you watched, since you were walking everyone down, had you been able to watch the fight before and see his style at all, or your corner guy? Or
no,
were you too busy
not really,
working?
because I was running around for art and taking care of stuff, and so I saw parts of different fights, and I saw part of his fight with David Levicki, who was a big Wing Chun guy. And I remember John McCarthy pulling Johnny's gi pants up because they kept going down around his knees. But I knew he had fought a long fight. But that all clicked when I got into the cage and saw who was there. I didn't even know who I was going to fight until I got in the cage.
I've been in the cage before myself, and when they lock the doors, it's a feeling like you only get from being in the cage. What were you thinking when the cage doors actually close and it's about time to fight?
Holy shit! What am I going to do now? Really, like I said, I was mentally checked out when that cage door closed, and there's a pretty good sized crowd, and it's the whole thing just really got the best of me.
Had you ever sparred with a kickboxer before? Johnny Rhodes came from a pretty solid kickboxing style. Had you seen that kind of style before?
Not particularly, but I had sparred quite a few different karate people over the years, and the style, stylistically, it wasn't a whole lot different. He was just better at it than I was that night.
Right. It looked like at that time you, every time he hit you, you turned around a little bit. Did he hit really hard, or was it different with no gloves? But you said you were sparring with no gloves on.
Well, the first good shot that he hit me with, he hit me over my eye, and a lot of people don't realize this. My eye completely went white. It was like trying to look through a glass of milk. I lost the vision completely out of that eye right away. And so that kind of freaked me out a little bit, and I was trying to protect myself enough to get my vision back. And when I probably, had I been thinking and I had my mind right, I would have realized that if I went on the offense, I probably would have been the best defense. But I tried to keep myself covered and try and get my vision back and get the bells to quit ringing in my head, and that didn't work, obviously.
Now, with your style karate, are you allowed to hit in the face in competition?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no prohibitions. That was one reason why I didn't like karate tournaments, is because there was all these rules and limits on contact and on target selection, and to me it was totally unrealistic. That was one of the main things that I liked about the UFC, especially in the early days, was that it let two fighters be two fighters, and you go out there and it was real and it was honest, and there was no bullshit, no politics, no nothing. There was, one guy was definitely going to win and one guy was definitely going to lose. There
was not even judges to mess up the scores like they are today. It was the old days. You ate a whole.
Yeah, it was brutal and it was honest. There was no controversy at the end of a show saying, well, I think this decision sucked or that guy should have won. You know what? One guy won and one guy lost, and that was the way it was.
You ate a lot of knees in that fight, which would be illegal now. You're a grounded opponent. Were you used to fighting from that position, or in karate, they stand you back up when you hit the ground, correct?
Well, in sport karate, yes, but in our sparring, no. When we practiced, if that's where we went, that's where we fought from. So we tried to stay on our feet. That was more of our emphasis. It was more to stay on our feet, not to be down.
Okay, so the fight's over now. What did you think about the whole experience after the fight? Like the after party, how were you there? How were the other fighters to you? And we want to know. Everybody
was great. The after party, I I didn't really want to go. I didn't feel like partying. Wasn't in a partying mood, but I just got my ass kicked and my pride was hurt. But I thought, well, I'm here and it is what it is, and I'll go. And I went, and everybody was good. Everybody was in a good mood. Everybody treated me well. I think it was a camaraderie. I think everybody treated everybody well for the most part. There was, it was a good party. It was fun. The UFC, Art, Orion, all the people involved, they did a great job of taking care of us, and I have no complaints at all of the way I was treated.
Was Ken Shamrock an okay guy? We had a lot of UFC guys that fought in that era, and everyone says Ken Shamrock was a dickhead. How was he? How did he treat you? I know he was there with the cast on.
Yeah, he was there. He had a cast on. I never talked to him. We never even said so much as hi. He had an aura about him that, like, he didn't really want to talk to anybody, and I figured, well, that's fine. That's the vibe I get. That's all right. I don't need to talk to him either.
I met him at
I can't say that he was a dickhead because he never said anything to me, but I can't say that he wasn't warm and fuzzy either.
Yeah, he made fun of me when I met him at a grappling tournament too because I had a crazy haircut. So I was just wondering. So now you fought. People don't understand that there wasn't really, the internet was just beginning back then. So now the internet starts and we have all these chat groups. There's the fetal fighting position, and there's all kinds of these internet message boards that are just starting. And you kind of took a huge brunt of that style of teasing and internet bullying. How was that to take as a fighter and as a person?
It sucked. If you want to know the truth, it was a nightmare. I like you said, the internet was pretty much in its infancy, and I'm a technological moron in the first place. I'm an old guy. All that stuff was, it was just beyond me, and I didn't have internet for quite a while even after that. And so I was oblivious to some of it, but I had friends who were very well versed in the internet, and pretty soon I started to see and hear some of these things, and to have ridicule and insults and all the derogatory comments that were made over a long period of time, it was insulting. It was, I'm a man that's got some pride, not in an egotistical sense, but I like to take pride in the things that I do and try to do my best in everything in life, and I don't like to get have a little over 3 minutes of my life. I don't like to be judged on that and to take heat for that for as long as I did. I expected to take criticism, and that's warranted. You put yourself out in the public eye, and if you'd be willing to take the accolades if you were successful, you have to be willing to take the criticism if you're not. But when it crossed the line into ridicule and personal insults and phone calls and all this anonymous bullshit that went on, and not seriously, honestly, not one person ever came up to me face to face and said anything like what was directed at me on the internet. I started going to MMA shows in Minnesota back in the early 2000s, and I thought, well, okay, now we'll run into some of these people, and if they were there, they weren't coming up to me talking any of that shit. So.
I can't lie. I've made a few Fred Ettish jokes myself, but that's one of the reasons why I was so interested in see what you've been doing and follow you, just because of the intense amount of ridicule you took. I thought it was very unfair. You were kind of the face of UFC. I mean, you were the karate guy, and you went in there and you fought your best. And I know you've adapted your style. We'll get into that in a little bit. But I thought some of that was very unwarranted. And a lot of the people that even listen to me, they know who you are just from all the ridicule. They don't know Fred Ettish the person. So I wanted to make sure that I got you on. And everyone has a chance to hear your side of the story and hear what kind of person you are.
I appreciate it.
Now, Brian Moore is got this Legend of the Cage, and me and Caveman believe you belong in it. As one of the fighters for the Legend of the Cage. How you feel about that?
Well, I'm honored that anybody would think that I belong in something like that, but I disagree with putting the name Legend anywhere close to my name. My feeling on that is there are legends out there. You got guys like Dan Severn, Don Fry, Pat Miletich, who was a huge influence on me and who I consider a very good friend, and on and on and on I can go. You know, you've got guys that gave so much to the sport, especially back in the early days. And, you know, they had successes. Some of them had successes and failures, but they had numerous fights. They had numerous different types of contributions that they made to not only the UFC, but MMA as a sport and NHB back in the old days. And those are guys that the word legend applies to. And I'm not even close to their category, and I don't want anybody to ever think that I think that I am.
I think you're undervaluing your impact on mixed martial arts is. UFC 2, you're one of the faces of it. The whole draw of the UFC was all these different styles coming together. And each one of you guys, you had a character, or people wouldn't watch it. You had the special charisma that only guys at that time had because you were representing that individual art. And for you to go in there and do that, I think you're undervaluing the impact that you had on UFC. The whole reason we go back and we watch the old UFCs, guys like me and guys of my generation and even younger people, is to see all of these guys that fought and their personalities, and it all shines through when there's no rules, there's no time limits. You guys just went in there in a time when no one knew what was going to happen. Like you said, you didn't even see UFC 1. UFC 1 wasn't out where you could find it. It was just there. You guys, you went in, you fought, representing your styles, and there's just something pure that's not in MMA anymore. Now it's a totally refined sport. It's had an explosion, but it's not NHB. It's not what it started out as. And you were one of the founding fighters of that style.
Well, I appreciate your sentiment, and you know, the hardcore fans like yourself, they realize things that the vast majority of the fans today are completely ignorant of. I go to fight shows all the time, and nobody knows who I am, and nobody cares because it's so far. I hate to say so far back in the past, because chronologically it hasn't been that many years, because MMA really is still a very young sport. But for today's fans, they don't know anything about what happened in 1993 and 1994. They're all, you know, 20 years after that. I mean, they have no appreciation or understanding for where the sport came from, you know, who helped build the sport from nothing, and you know, they see what it is now. And it seems to me like there's a lot of people, not just in MMA, but in just things in general, they don't look back and realize that everything came from somewhere. Everything had to be born from something, and then it had to evolve. It had to, if it was going to survive, it had to evolve. It has to grow. It has to be nurtured, and people do that. And people are involved in all the little nuances and all many different ways over a long period of time to bring it to where it is now. But most people are very short-sighted. They see the now. They don't see the before.
That's even more of a reason why you should get involved with Brian and Legends of the Cage. As some guys are trying to do, they're trying to put that out there, right, to show that you guys do deserve respect and where the sport came from. And that's one of the reasons why I believe in Brian Moore so much.
Oh yeah, I love what he's doing, and me and Caveman like big fans of the sport, and we love the old school, and yeah, you know, we believe you you belong in Legend of the Cage.
Well, again, I sure appreciate that anybody would think that I contributed anything that was worthy of that. So.
All right, enough pumping up your ego. Let's get back to our what we were talking about.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
All right. Did you face any backlash in your real life? People coming up to you? I know you didn't say that too much, but what about your family and your friends hearing about, that Fred Ettish guy, he sucks? Anything that actually impacted on your regular life, or did it affect your job or anything like that?
It affected my personal life, but it didn't. Like I said, there was, people were doing it on the internet and on the phone, or I even got a letter or two in the mail, and it was all directed at me. My family never had to feel the brunt of it, except for and how it affected me and my personality. So it did affect me in a very deep way, maybe more than it should have. But I'm a person who feels things deeply, and I internalize a lot of things. I'm a perfectionist, and when you fall that far short of perfection, and everybody keeps rubbing your nose in it, and like I said, doing it in such a personal and malicious way, then it affects you. And then I had a lot of other traumas in my life, and it seemed like when things were really going bad and the shit was really hitting the fan, then all of a sudden this would come up too. It would flare up. I would get another big flurry of comments on chat rooms or emails or so on and so forth, and it just seemed like everything was piling on. So it affected me in that way very deeply. But as far as, other people saying, or like, family members saying that, oh man, this person came up to me and said this and said that, I never heard any of that.
That's pretty good, man. It'd be awful for your family to suffer for something that you had the balls to get in a cage and do.
And they don't got the balls to do it, and they judging you,
Has it affected the way, I know you teach martial arts, has it affected teaching martial arts? Or people like, don't go to that guy, he sucks, or anything like that? No, Ray's laughing, but I'm serious. I mean, it has a serious financial impact as well.
It could be. I don't know. I've never had anybody say, "Oh, I'm not going to train with you because you blow chunks because you suck in UFC too." But I never have had a large following. I've been teaching MMA. Since I moved to Kansas City here in Christmas of 2004, and it was in 2006, I believe, when I started teaching publicly MMA here. And I had a pretty good sized team at first, but it slowly dwindled down, and I still teach, and I've got just a small, maybe half a dozen students, and I've only got like 3 or 4 active fighters. So and then there's other people. Kansas City's got a lot of martial arts, a lot of MMA, and everybody's got more guys than I do, and that could be it. It's like, well, why train with that guy when you could train with, Rob Timmons or James Krause or Rudy Bears or any one of a number of other people who've had much more successful careers. And, let's face it, I'm an old guy, and these other guys are a lot younger, and young guys like to train with young guys. They don't necessarily want to train with old guys.
Well, as long as you want to throw out a plug for your gym, how they can come to your gym?
We're out in Independence. I train in, I don't have my own gym, but I train out of a gym called Dragon Family Martial Arts, and we're easy to find. Just Google us. Just Google Dragon Family Martial Arts, and I'll be there somewhere.
Awesome. So make sure you guys go check it out if you want to train with a UFC legend. Ray's giving me the laugh, but I got to throw it in there. He's laughing because he doesn't want to argue with you again about going to the legend. But let's go into your comeback into the cage. You came back. How old were you when you fought again?
53.
So you came back to the cage and you fought at 53 years old, and that was a professional fight, correct?
Oh yeah, it had to be pro because obviously I got paid for the UFC, so I could not fight amateur.
For you guys that fight now, I'm a professional fighter. I train with a bunch of guys. They don't understand. You don't have any amateur fights. You have one fight with no ABC rules, with no rules. So you went from that to step into professional mixed martial arts fight nowadays with trained athletes. Where did you do your training at for that fight, for the lead up to that fight? So we can get into Miletich a little bit too.
Well, it was slightly different than UFC 2's training, I'll tell you that. I had a lot of good people around me. I had a couple of good wrestlers, one of whom was an exceptionally good jiu-jitsu guy, and I worked with them a lot. These were guys that I had helped to train, and when I decided that I needed to do this, then I had them help me because they were obviously better at wrestling and better at jiu-jitsu than I was, and that's just the smart thing to do, is to find people that are better at you, especially in your areas of weakness, and try and suck as much knowledge out of them as you can. As far as the conditioning goes, I pride myself on my physical conditioning anyway. If you check with the guys that train with me, they'll tell you that I'm a stickler for conditioning, and did some good hard rounds, did a lot of live rolling, live sparring, put myself in, or had them put me in the worst positions possible, and tried to fight out of them, and just make myself comfortable in that.
Can you talk about training with Miletich, Pat Miletich, and over at his camp?
We could talk for hours about training with Pat.
We got all the time in the world.
Well, like I said earlier, Pat, as far as in MMA, hands down, Pat Miletich has had more influence on me than anybody has. My time with Pat, I don't want to misrepresent it. I don't want to make it sound like I was like a Matt Hughes or a Jens Pulver or Jeremy Hornet spent every day out there for months and years at a time. That would be wrong. But I spent time out there on probably at least a half a dozen different occasions over the years. I was a Miletich Fighting Systems affiliate instructor, so I went through the certification for that, which was very intense. And I knew Pat. I'd met Pat at shows in Iowa way back in over 20 years ago probably. And I always admired Pat. I admired his personality, his work ethic. His guys were always in great shape, and they were well-rounded. He would bring people into his gym to help with the training too, and I thought that was a good show of a lack of ego on Pat's part. Pat being the person that he was probably the best in the world, but yet he would still bring in like a jiu-jitsu guy to help people get better at jiu-jitsu, and everything about Pat really rubbed off on me. And even to this day, I haven't seen Pat in a while, and we chat every once in a while, but I haven't trained with him in years. But the lessons that I learned out there at his gym from him and from his people has affected me enough to where I still fashion a lot of my training style after what I learned from those guys, and especially from Pat.
Yeah, with Pat Mix, like Pat Mix back in the day with his team.
Miletich, not Mix. You could.
Pat
Mix is one of our highlight fighters from our gym. That's who he's talking about. But Pat Miletich, go ahead.
You gonna keep that?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep that in there. You messed up. It's gotta stay in.
Okay, Miletich, with the team he had back in the day, it was like the most successful team. Like we had like every weight class had a champion, right, Caveman?
Yeah, pretty much. A couple rival schools at the time. There was them. There was Hammer House. Who else was? That's about
Lions
it, really.
Den.
Yeah, Lions Den. But they were by that asshole Ken Shamrock. We didn't talk about them. Only these guys were good.
Brad Collar was gonna get Ken Shamrock.
Yeah, Brad Kohler says you're a really good guy too, man. That you're really fucking tall.
You ref from one of his events?
I worked for Brad for quite a while. Brad was at one point was the major promoter in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, and I lived about a 4-hour drive away from there. And I was introduced to Brad. And Brad was always really super good to me. I judged, I refereed, I did everything. I set up chairs. I did everything that you could possibly imagine to help Brad and and be a part of MMA. That was kind of me coming out of my shell a little bit because from the time after UFC 2 until I started working for Brad, I just kind of kept my head down. And once I started to reintroduce myself to the world, Brad was there, and he gave me a chance to be a part of MMA again, and I'll always be grateful to Brad for that.
Awesome. Have you checked out the Combo Hitter yet? That's his product, the Combo Hitter. You have to get with him.
I've heard about it. Yeah, I should do that.
We were trying to plug it for him because Ray's got one.
Yeah, we got to do a Caveman review on it.
Yeah. So Brad,
well, I'm always looking for good gear, so I'll have to get with Brad.
All right, good. Brad's a friend of the show. He always calls up making fun of Ken Shamrock.
Yeah.
So he's trying to get that fight bad.
Yeah, and he said if we get that fight, we gonna be his corner, Caveman.
Yeah, so if we make that fight happen, we can be in the corner.
I'll be there to watch.
All right. So before your comeback, who was encouraging you, or was anyone encouraging you to come back in the cage and give it one more try?
I was encouraging me. It was just me. I had tried to figure out ways to be at peace with what happened at UFC 2 and to continue on with my life, but it just haunted me internally. It was, a lot of people say, well, it was a redemption fight, and it depends on what you mean by redemption. I had to do something to be okay with who I was as a martial artist, and the UFC 2 just haunted me something terrible, and I couldn't put it to sleep. And I decided that the only way I could exercise those demons was to go back in there and do it again. And so it was 100% my decision. It was something that I had wrestled with internally for a long time before I said anything to anybody about it. and I made the decision, and really there was nothing that was going to stop me from going back and doing it by the time I made the decision, because after all those years of agonizing over it, and there's a few different times I tried to get back into an MMA fight, and different things happened to keep it from coming to reality, and I just decided that this was it. I was going to do it.
Was there anyone that really tried to dissuade you from getting back into the cage, or were people pretty encouraging?
Really, everybody that I talked to was very encouraging. I've got a pretty small, circle of friends and confidants, and nobody tried to talk me out of it. The people that know me well know that I'm always in good shape, and they also know I'm stubborn as hell, and trying to talk me out of it probably wouldn't have done any good anyway. My wife was very supportive. That was the one person that I was a little worried about. But she, I think, thought, well, if it'll make him a little easier to live with, shit, let him go.
That's good. I mean, because that could be something that someone that's really close to you wouldn't want to see you do, about how it had a huge emotional impact on you the first time. I can tell just from talking to you, you kind of take your self-worth from how good of a fighter you are, and obviously you didn't have a very good first showing. That if I was your family, I'd be like, are you sure you really want to do this at 53? I mean, it'd be different if you're like 30, 33, but 53 is like a tough age to get out there and fight.
39, Caveman.
39, yeah. I'm 39. I'm trying to get back in the cage too.
40.
40.
Yeah. At UFC too, I was 38 already.
God, man, you're amazing.
And we can't all be Randy Couture. So.
Right. Well, it kind of sounds like you did. You got another win at 53. That's pretty damn good. Can you talk about that fight a little bit? I watched the fight, but I'd like to hear it in your words. Can you describe that fight, the experience?
Well, it was anxiety provoking, to say the least. I waited 15 and a half years to get back in there and try and do things in what I considered to be the right way. And it was not so much as, obviously I wanted to win. Winning was huge for me, but I wanted to at least show that, I could be a lot better than what I was at UFC 2 and what I showed there. And, going into the cage, I didn't know anything about the young guy that I fought. I think he was 0-1, or I think that's what they told me. I didn't know who he was. Didn't even see him at the weigh-ins. And we got in there, and there was a lot of things, so many things that I wanted to do in the fight itself. All the things that I had trained to do, and I imagine every fighter's the same way. They want to really put on the best showing and show how well-rounded they are. And once we got started, I just decided, oh shit, I just want to finish this fight and be done with it. So I did what I could to did what I could to get the win as quickly as I could, and breathe a big sigh of relief at the end.
So you submitted him in the very first round, 3 minutes, 20 seconds. Did it feel like redemption, or was it just like, thank God I fucking won this, give me my win money, let's get out of here?
All of the above. All of the above. Internally, it was like, okay, one of the biggest victories of that fight was not necessarily me getting my hand raised and the other guy not, but it was walking down into that cage and getting back into that cage again. That was huge for me. I told the guys that were with me, I said, I want to take my time walking down here. I said, because I waited 15 and a half years for this. And I want to make this thing count, and I want to soak it all in. And there was, like I said, there was a ton of anxiety, almost like flashbacks, from what happened before. But I knew that no matter what, this was something that I had to do, and I was prepared to do. And if the worst thing happened, if I looked like shit again, that had already happened to me once, and it happened to me on a much larger stage than what this was. This was a small show up in Minnesota, and it's not like it would have been the first time if things went wrong, and I would have been a lot more mentally prepared for the fallout if worse things happen.
Do you believe in ring rust?
ring corrosion, maybe. Yeah.
I mean, 15 years between fights, according to your record, and Ronda Rousey had a year, something like that, Ray?
Yeah,
something like that, yeah.
Yeah. She said she had so much ring rust from a year off. And she had the same thing. She had a horrible loss, and you were able to put it behind you. How much of that do you attribute to mental toughness, or what do you think?
Boy, that's hard to say, because I don't know her as a person. All I know is what you see in the media, and I hate to, for obvious reasons, I I know more than a lot of folks do about being judged by the media, but I can't help but think that having that much time off with the sport progressing the way it is now, and with the caliber of fighters that are out there now, that had to have an effect on her. And having, my personal opinion, she blew through everybody else so resoundingly until she ran into Holly Holm. I think she maybe was believing all of the hype that surrounded her about that she was the best athlete ever, and she was the best fighter of that had ever walked, and that she could never lose, and that all she had to do was show up and walk in there and just do the same thing that she'd always done, and she would walk out with another victory in a minute. And these other fighters nowadays are they're elite athletes. They've got elite coaching. Holly Holm was already a multi-time boxing champion, so the enormity of the event I don't think affected her. And then when Rousey came back and fought Amanda Nunes, how much did the devastation that Holm brought on her, how much did that affect her mentally? I don't know. Like I said, not knowing her as a person, I wouldn't know. But getting beaten that resoundingly is tough to handle. And I would think, not that I would know, but I would think that if you were that great of an athlete as Rousey is, and all of a sudden you got handled that badly, that it would be even harder for a person like that mentally. I just don't know. But her judo experience, she'd lost in judo before. She wasn't undefeated in judo, and she fought on the biggest stage that judo had. She fought, she was an Olympic level judoka, and so I just don't know. There's just so much I don't know about her, but all I can do is speculate. And I kind of hate to do that.
If you could say one thing to her, she wants to continue her fighting career, what kind of advice would you give her?
Well, what I would tell her is if it's in your heart, if it's what you want to do, if it's not what somebody else is telling you should do, or anybody's trying to talk you into or out of, throw all that shit aside and get inside of yourself and decide what it is you want. And is being a champion again something that you want? Then if it is, then a lot of other things have to go on the back burner, and you just have to just bust your ass and be just focused only on that again, because these other girls out there now, these other fighters, hey, it's I don't think that it's ever going to be as easy for her as it was, because they're getting better and better, and she just needs to just decide that she's going to make every sacrifice that needs to be made to get to the top. And like I said, from her background in judo and in MMA, obviously she can do it, but I think she has to want it more than anything else, more than being an actor, more than being anything else. She has to want to be a champion, and everything else has to take a back burner.
What do you think about weight cutting? Weight cutting has become a huge topic in MMA now that guys aren't making weight. You never really had to deal with it until your last fight. It says you fought at 170. You're a pretty tall guy at 6'1". What kind of experiences do you have with weight cutting, and what do you think the UFC should do about it?
I've never had to cut weight, really. I've always been lean. I was way underweight for that second fight, because I thought we were going to be fighting at 165, and then I actually weighed in at 159. So
for 170?
Yeah, no, for 160. Well, I thought we agreed on 165, and the other guy came in heavier. It was a little bit confusing, but anyway.
On your bio, it's listed as a 170-pound bout.
It could have been. So I don't know.
That's pretty light. That's 11 pounds underweight. So your guy probably weighed like 186 by the time you guys fought.
Damn.
What do you think about weight cutting? Do you think they should ban the process, or what?
I think it needs to be made. Something needs to be done to make sure that it's done safely, and I think there's probably, the way it sounds, that steps are being taken. I think personally, I think it's crazy to do the huge weight cut that some of these guys do. I think it's bad for your health. I think young guys and certain people with certain metabolisms, it's a lot easier for, but as you get older, it gets harder and harder to do, and it takes more and more of a toll on your body. And I think dehydrating yourself takes a toll on your brain, and the brain is already in a bad enough situation in a fight anyway, because it's going to obviously get a chance to get pounded around pretty good. I don't know what the answer is, but I think it needs to be safe, and I think sometimes you need to save fighters from themselves. That's why you have referees in there now, because most people that have a real fighting heart, they don't want to tap, they don't want to stop, they don't want to give up. You get a Renzo Gracie that's willing to let his arm just get blown completely out, and he's not going to tap. Somebody needs to go in there and save him from that. You get guys that are getting pounded in the head, and they don't want to quit because it's humiliating to quit. The referee needs to go in there and save him from himself. I think weight cutting might be the same thing. I think some guys might need to be saved from themselves for making those monster weight cuts that maybe they can tolerate right now, but I think in the long haul might have a detrimental effect on their organs, including their brains. So
I personally think they should go to something similar to the wrestling that they have in New York State now. We have you weigh in and they take your hydration level, and you're only allowed to cut so much weight. You have to be a certain amount hydrated of your body. And I think UFC should go to some sort of measurement like that. And the problem is you're going to have guys that are going to have to move up like 3 weight classes. But I think you're going to end up with better fights, because I think guys are going to have better gas tanks when they're fully hydrated. And I think it'll definitely knock down on traumatic brain injuries. And I think you'll see less knockouts, to be honest with you.
I agree with you. I think that sounds like a good plan. And I think, like you say, I think the results would be better. I think you get better fights. I think you'd have healthier fighters. I think in the long run, I think it'd be better for everybody in the sport.
What do you think about a fighters union? This is the last modern MMA question I have for you. What do you think about a fighters union to increase the fighter pay? And what do you think about fighter pay in general, actually, compared to what the UFC takes in to what it pays out to its fighters? I think it's like 15 or 20% of their intake they pay out to their fighters. That's it.
Well, from an outside perspective looking in, it's hard to say because I don't know the ins and the outs of the business. And it certainly looks like when you look at the raw numbers, it seems like the fighters should be getting a larger percentage of what's being generated. The fighters are the show. Granted, there's a lot of things that go into making a show or a company like the UFC, and there's a lot of things that an idiot like me doesn't realize about what the costs are. But I do know that without the fighters, they don't have shit. And these guys and gals are putting, this is their livelihood. They put so much into it. And as professional athletes, they have a real short lifespan of earning potential. And they deserve to get compensated for that. I think if you're working as a professional fighter at the elite level, you shouldn't have to worry about how am I going to pay my bills within reason. I mean, you have to be a responsible human being too and not have a stupid lifestyle. But you should be able to make a living at it. And if that takes fighters banding together, then that might be what it takes. But again, from the perspective where I'm sitting, where I don't know much about anything, it seems like there's like 3 or 4 different groups or unions that are trying to form at the same time. And that's the recipe for failure, because you're taking an already small pool of employees and you're dividing them up amongst different organizations. I think it needs to be one unified group, and then they need to come up with a plan and be reasonable about it and have good negotiators. But yeah, I think it's a good idea that if they can somehow unionize or get together, that they would be able to collectively bargain for a better wage for themselves. And I'm not particularly pro-union in the first place, but back in the days when unions were first formed, that's what a union was for, and I believe in that. I think employees deserve to get decent and fair pay, and if the company doesn't give them that, then they need to do something.
Yeah, it's sad guys like Michael McDonald. He can't afford to do a camp. He's like one of the top 10 guys in his weight class. He just fought at UFC 91. He's one of the top, Fight Night 91. He's one of the higher ranked guys on the ladder. He's a top 15, top 10 athlete. He can't afford to do fight camp. He can't make enough money to put his camp together. I mean, sure, he gets $20,000, something like that, but you don't take into account your manager gets a big cut of that. You got to pay to do your training camp. You got to pay for your food. there's a lot of unassociated costs that you need to
Oh
pay
my
to,
gosh,
to be
yeah.
able to do that camp.
$20,000 is not $20,000 when you take out everything that he's got to take out. You know, even talking about the taxes that he has to pay on that money.
Yeah, that's not even counting taxes.
Yeah, he's $20,000 is for a fight is it's nothing. A person just going to work every day 9 to 5 thinks, oh yeah, $20,000, that's good money, but that the fighter never sees $20,000 out of a $20,000 purse.
Not only
Not
that,
even close.
it's not even it's like, oh, it's $20,000 for 15 minutes. Wow, big deal. But it's not 15 minutes. It's 6 weeks of every day of his life training hard.
Yeah, minimum.
And that's just for like a short, a regular camp. Not to mention all the time he's got to train. He's got to probably pay to do
Medical
jiu-jitsu,
bills.
medical bills. You gotta get your MRI. You gotta have your blood work, which is expensive if you don't have insurance. There's all kinds of stuff.
I agree. I agree 100%.
Are you gonna fight again? Just playing.
Somebody show me the money.
Do you got any young guys that will fight in your gym?
Yeah, I've got some amateurs right now. I've got a real good 185 pounder. He started a little bit later in life too, but he's really come a long way. He's a good guy. His name is Tony. You ready? I've had several other guys over the years since I've been here in Kansas City, but right now Tony is my most active fighter. I've got another young guy named Calvin Williams. He's taking a break right now, but Tony's been pretty much carrying the torch for us right now.
Do you see any difference between the younger fighters from today had to go through as a fighter? Do you think you were
they
tougher
get great
back in the day?
training now.
Yeah, they do got great training.
Well, they get the benefit of the experiences that we had coming up. I mean, that's if we don't learn, if us older fighters don't learn from what happened to us and then teach those lessons to the young fighters, then it's all wasted. And that's one of the things that I look at in my experience. I look at all of the things that I didn't have, all the things that I should have had, and then look at the things that I started to get later on, like from Pat Miletich, and so then I can put together a much better training atmosphere and a training environment for these guys so that they don't have to go through what I went through that didn't work, but they can learn the things that do work and save them a lot of time and a lot of heartache.
Awesome. Do you actually practice gi jiu-jitsu at all? Are you ranked?
I don't do gi jiu-jitsu. I've done no gi. I'm not ranked at all anywhere with anybody.
Maybe you need a caveman to go down to Kansas City and help you out with that.
Well, I've got nothing against gi, absolutely. If I was a younger guy and I had more time, I would definitely do gi jiu-jitsu.
What are you talking about?
No question about it.
He'll train into his 80s, man. You got plenty of time. Plenty of time.
It's more that I've got to work full time and I've got to go to the gym and teach these other guys, and then I have to go home and then hope that my wife lets me in the door. And,
I know that.
There's just so many hours in a day. If all I had to do was train, absolutely, I'd train gi jiu-jitsu in a heartbeat.
Awesome. I got one last question I waited at the end to ask just in case you hang up. What's going on with the porn stash that you had in UFC 2? What's up with all you guys with those porn stashes back in that day?
Well, we were throwbacks. We were throwbacks from an earlier era.
You, Dan Severn, all you guys, man. Don Fry, you all got the porn stash going on back then. It must have been the style,
well,
huh?
That's
70s?
That was more the style back in the 70s and the 80s, and we were older guys from that era. So.
I was just wondering because you go back. I never got a chance to ask Dan Severn this question when we had him on. I was scared he was going to slap the shit out of me. At least you were really far away, so it's a long drive for you.
He had a more. Him and Fry had much better stashes than I did, and probably not coincidentally, they had a lot better careers too.
Yeah, I really think facial hair leads to a good, strong career. If you see a picture of me when I post this, you'll see what I'm talking about. All right, thank you for coming on, Mr. Ettish. We're about at our window here at 1 hour. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an honor to have you on.
Yeah, it's been an honor.
Since the first day I had this podcast, I wanted to get you on. You're a kind of hard guy to track down.
I know we was asking Brian Moore. Who else we asked?
Brad Kohler. We asked Dan Severn. We had a hard time getting a hold of you, but I'm glad I finally got a hold of you and got you on my podcast. It's something I wanted to do.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming on, man, and have a great day. Have a great career, and hopefully one of our guys will fight each other and we can meet cage side at UFC someday.
All right, I'll meet you there.
All right.
All
Sounds
right.
good, sir.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you.
Oh, Ray just hung up on our guest. Great job, Ray.
Damn, oops, my bad.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. It's one thing I really want to do. I really respect Fred Ettish. I'm glad that it's a great story. I love the story of
Oh
Fred
yeah,
Ettish.
I mean, like all the guests we had before, we asked about him, and like we believe he belonged in Legend of the Cage, and he's a legend.
He is a legend. And someone I like. UFC 2 was the whole thing of it was just the whole spectacle of it, and he's part of that spectacle, man.
And it was a 16-man tournament.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
And I had to ask him about the fetal fighting position, man. I could not do it. That's crazy. Can you imagine everything he went through?
Yeah.
Can you imagine if everyone made fun of you for being out of gas when the time I had to hold you up with Greg Gannon?
Yeah.
Be like, man, Ray's out of shape. 60,000 people watched it,
Yeah.
Ray's not laughing. He doesn't think it's funny that it ran out of shape.
Yeah, it was a weight cut that got me tired. Jeez.
All right. Well, we're out of here from Caveman's Corner. Thank you guys for listening. I'm glad you guys could experience this podcast. And we're going to be out from Buffalo, New York in the Fandoozy Studios.
Peace out, guys. Caveman's gone. Yep, I still owe him that $10. He ain't asked about it. Yes, I got away with it again.
I heard that, Ray.
Oops. Oh man. Oh.